I never thought trusting my wife would nearly cost me everything. When Melissa told me her mother was dying of cancer, I didn't hesitate. I watched her cry, shaking in my arms, begging for help to cover treatments that insurance wouldn't touch. So I did what any husband would do. I told her to take what we needed from our savings. 6 months later, one phone call shattered my world. Her mother wasn't sick. In fact, she was perfectly fine, enjoying her retirement in Florida without a clue about Melissa's lies. I felt like a fool used betrayed and drained of nearly $175,000. But what Melissa didn't know was that I had a plan of my own. Behind our bedroom dresser, hidden in plain sight, was a safe she had forgotten existed. Inside it was everything I needed to turn the tables. If you've ever wondered how far someone you love might go to deceive you, stay with me. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about how I made sure Melissa regretted every dollar she stole. I met Melissa 8 years ago at a friend's barbecue in Austin. She was charming with this easy laugh that made everyone around her feel at ease. I was a construction manager, steady job, steady life, and Melissa brought a spark I didn't know I was missing. Within a year, we were married. People said we were the perfect balance, me, practical and grounded, her spontaneous and full of life. For a while it felt true. We built a routine, saved diligently, and talked endlessly about buying our dream home. Every dollar we tucked away was a step closer to that future. Melissa worked in marketing, always dressed sharp, always knowing the right thing to say. I trusted her with everything, including our finances. We shared a joint savings account, pooling our incomes together. That's what marriage is about, right? Trust partnership. So when she came home one evening, eyes red and puffy, I was immediately on edge. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I sat beside her, heart racing, fearing the worst. Through choked breaths, she told me her mother, who lived alone in Florida, had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It was aggressive, she said. The treatments were experimental and expensive, and insurance wouldn't cover most of it. I didn't even think twice. Take whatever we need, I told her. Family comes first. I remember holding her that night, feeling proud that I could support her in such a dark time. That's what a husband should do. Be the rock when everything else falls apart. The first transfer was $20,000. Melissa said it was for an initial round of treatments. Over the next few weeks, there were more transfers. 10,000 here, 15,000 there. Each time she'd give me an update about a new therapy or unexpected hospital fee. I never questioned it. We stopped going out to eat, put our house hunting plans on hold. I told friends we were tightening our belts because of a family emergency. Everyone admired how supportive I was being. But looking back, there were signs. Melissa never let me speak to her mother directly. She said it was too hard for her mom to talk to. Emotional, too exhausting after treatments. When I offered to fly down to Florida to help, Melissa insisted it wasn't necessary. She claimed her cousin was already handling things on the ground. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, because the alternative, that my wife could be lying to me about something so serious, was unthinkable. Months passed. Our savings account, once a symbol of our shared dreams, was nearly drained. But every time I looked at Melissa, I saw the same grief, the same desperation. Then one Saturday afternoon, while Melissa was running errands, I got a call from my own mother. She asked how Melissa's mom was holding up. Something inside me snapped. I realized I didn't have a single piece of proof. No medical bills, no doctor's notes, nothing but Melissa's word. That's when doubt crept in. Quiet at first, but impossible to ignore. I found myself pacing the living room, phone in hand, staring at the contact number Melissa had for her mother. My heart pounded as I dialed it, rang and rang, until finally a cheerful voice answered. "Hi, honey, how are you and Melissa?" No weakness, no sadness, just a healthy woman enjoying her day. I froze after a brief conversation, pretending I just called to check in. I hung up and sat in silence. That was the moment everything changed. Melissa wasn't just hiding something. She had fabricated an entire tragedy and stolen nearly $175,000 from the life we were building together. I didn't know where she was that afternoon, but I knew one thing for sure. When she walked back through that door, nothing between us would ever be the same again. When Melissa came home that evening, she acted like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, dropped her shopping bags by the door, and asked what I wanted for dinner. I just stood there watching her like I was seeing a stranger in my own home. "Did you visit your mom today?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated just for a second, but enough for me to catch it. "No," she said quickly. "I was picking up a few things for her online." Why, that was it, the lie smooth as ever. But now I knew the truth. I didn't confront her right away. I needed more. I needed to be sure that when I called her out, there'd be no way for her to twist the story. Over the next few days, I played along nodding at her updates, pretending to be the supportive husband. But behind the scenes, I started digging. Melissa had always handled the digital side of our finances. She was good with passwords, online, banking, all of it. But what she didn't know was that years ago, after a minor scare with identity theft, I had set up account alerts and backups. Quiet safeguards she never paid attention to. I went through our statements. The money wasn't going to any hospital or medical facility. It was being funneled into a separate account under her name, an account I never knew existed. From there, withdrawals were being made regularly, some large, some small, but none of them made sense for someone supposedly paying for cancer treatments. Then came the final piece. Late one night while Melissa was asleep, I checked the GPS tracker I had hidden in her car nearly a month prior. At the time, I thought I was being paranoid. Now I was grateful for every ounce of that suspicion. The tracker showed repeated visits to a condo complex across town. Same address, same pattern. Always during times when she claimed to be shopping for her mother or attending support group meetings. I looked up the property records. The condo had been purchased 3 months ago under Melissa's name and someone named Ryan Miller. I didn't recognize the name at first, but after a little social media sleuthing, it clicked. Ryan was a junior marketing associate at Melissa's firm, young, fresh out of college. The type Melissa would have brushed off as just a kid if I'd ever asked. My stomach turned. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the lies about her mother. Melissa had been planning an entirely separate life, using my hard-earned savings to fund it. The betrayal hit me in waves. First anger, then disbelief, and finally a cold, sharp clarity. When Melissa announced a few days later that she needed to fly to Florida for a week to handle some urgent medical decisions, I didn't say a word. I helped her pack, kissed her goodbye, and watched as she drove off, probably heading straight to that condo. The moment she was gone, I moved quickly. I opened the hidden safe behind our bedroom dresser, a safe Melissa had forgotten about, or maybe never really cared to notice. Inside were all the documents that truly mattered. Deeds, account information, my inheritance papers, and the proof of the GPS tracker data I'd been collecting. I knew I couldn't get back the money she'd already stolen, but I could make sure she wouldn't touch another cent. I contacted my bank, froze every joint account, transferred what little remained into a secured personal account, and called my lawyer. By the time Melissa returned, probably expecting to empty out whatever was left, I was ready. But I didn't confront her at the door. I didn't yell or demand answers. I let her walk into the house, straight toward the bedroom, where the safe door stood wide open. Empty. The look on her face when she realized everything was gone. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. She spun around, eyes wild. "Where is it, James? What did you do?" I simply stared at her, calm and collected. "I know everything, Melissa." Her face drained of color, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control. Melissa stood frozen in our bedroom, her eyes darting between me and the empty safe. For a moment, I could see the gears turning in her head, searching for a lie, an excuse, anything to regain control. But this time, I wasn't giving her an inch. "James, I can explain." She started, her voice shaky, but still laced with that manipulative sweetness she'd used so many times before. I raised my hand, cutting her off. "Don't. I've already talked to your mother. I know she's fine. I know about the condo. I know about Ryan." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. There it was, the truth, finally suffocating whatever script she thought she could spin. She dropped the act in an instant. The tears, the pleading, they vanished like they were never real to begin with. Instead, she crossed her arms and glared at me. "So what, you're spying on me now? Tracking my car, going through my finances?" Her tone was venomous, as if I was the one who had betrayed her. I felt a strange calm settle over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was past that. This wasn't about emotions. Now it was about finishing what I'd started. "You stole from me, Melissa. You lied for months. You planned a future without me using my money, and now you're mad because I figured it out." She scoffed, grabbing her phone like she was about to call someone. "Maybe Ryan, maybe a lawyer who knows I'm taking what's mine," she hissed. "You think you can just lock me out of everything? We're married, James. Half of that money is legally mine." I almost laughed. The audacity was unreal. "That's where you're wrong," I said, pulling a folder from the dresser. Inside were copies of documents she hadn't bothered to notice over the years. Proof that most of our assets, especially my inheritance, were protected. Separate accounts, pre-marital funds, things she had no legal claim. To her face twisted in frustration as she flipped through the papers, realizing just how little she actually controlled. Then came the final blow. "I've already filed for divorce," I told her, on grounds of financial fraud. "My lawyer has everything, the bank records, the GPS logs, even the property purchase tied to you and Ryan." Her bravado cracked. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. You can't prove I can, and I will." Melissa's breathing grew shallow. She glanced toward the door like she was calculating her next move. But there was nothing left for her here. "I suggest you pack whatever personal items you have left," I said, my voice steady, "because by tomorrow you'll be served." She didn't argue. She didn't scream or beg. Instead, she walked out of the room, her shoulders tense. Her pride shattered as I listened to her, moving around the house, stuffing clothes into bags. I felt a wave of emotions crash over me, grief, relief, and a strange sense of finality. This was the point of no return. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with was gone. Or maybe she had never really been who I thought she was. When Melissa finally left, slamming the door behind her, I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the empty safe. It wasn't just a symbol of what I'd protected, it was a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. Not just my money, but my sense of self, my dignity. I knew the hardest part was still ahead. The legal battles, the public fallout, the whispers from friends and family. But in that quiet moment alone in my house, I made a promise to myself. Melissa had played her game. Now it was my turn to finish it. The morning after Melissa walked out, I was already sitting in my lawyer's office. I wasn't just filing for divorce, I was building a case. A solid, undeniable case of financial fraud, deception, and asset misappropriation. My lawyer, Dan, a sharp, no-nonsense type, raised his eyebrows as I laid out the evidence. "You've done half my job for me," he said, flipping through the GPS logs, bank statements, and property records. "This isn't just divorce material. This is criminal." That's exactly what I wanted to hear. For months, Melissa thought she was playing me, but while she was busy weaving her web of lies, I was quietly setting the foundation to tear it all down. First, we filed for an immediate freeze on any assets tied to Melissa, especially the condo she bought with Ryan. Thanks to the paper trail, it wasn't hard to prove that the funds used were fraudulently obtained from our joint savings. Next, Dan filed a motion to subpoena Melissa's financial records and communications, emails, text messages, anything that could further demonstrate premeditation, and from what I'd already seen, there was plenty. But I wasn't stopping there. I reached out to Melissa's company's HR department through an anonymous tip providing evidence that she and Ryan had been involved in unethical financial dealings. Office romances weren't illegal, but using embezzled funds to co-purchase property, that was a different story. Within days, both Melissa and Ryan were placed under internal investigation. Melissa tried to call me. At first, it was angry voicemails accusing me of betrayal, threatening that I'd regret this. But as the legal pressure mounted, her tone shifted. The messages became desperate. Apologies, begging to talk things through. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. 1 week later, she was officially served the divorce papers, outlined everything: fraud, asset recovery, and a demand for full restitution of the $175,000 she'd siphoned from our savings. Melissa's lawyer tried to negotiate, claiming that since we were married, the lines between personal and joint assets were blurred. But Dan shut that down fast with documentation proving my inheritance was separate property and that Melissa had intentionally deceived me for personal gain. Meanwhile, the GPS tracker, data, and bank records painted a clear picture of her movements and spending habits. Every lie she told unraveled in black and white evidence. Then came the condo, with the court order in place. Melissa and Ryan were forced to forfeit the property. It was seized as part of the restitution process set to be sold to recover some of the stolen funds. Ryan didn't fare much better. The company's investigation concluded with his termination due to ethical violations and misuse of company time and resources. Melissa lost her job shortly after, her reputation in shambles, her finances frozen, and her new life, with Ryan crumbling before it even began. But I wasn't driven by revenge anymore. This was about making sure she couldn't do to anyone else what she'd done to me. By the end of the court proceedings, I had secured judgments ensuring Melissa would be held accountable for every dollar she stole. It would take years for her to repay it if she ever could, but the legal victory wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my sense of control, my dignity. When the dust finally settled, I took a long, hard look at my life. The dream home I once planned with Melissa was no longer my goal. I realized that security wasn't just about savings accounts or hidden safes. It was about knowledge awareness and protecting yourself from the people you least expect to hurt you. That's when I decided to take everything I'd learned the hard way and do something meaningful with it. I began working with a local community center offering free seminars on financial literacy, focusing on asset protection within relationships and marriages. You'd be surprised how many people blindly trust their partners without understanding the risks. I wasn't going to let my story end with bitterness. Melissa thought she emptied my savings. What she really did was teach me a lesson I'd never forget and one I could pass on to others. The day we walked into court, Melissa looked like a completely different person. Gone was the confident, sharp-tongued woman who once controlled every conversation. She looked smaller, somehow exhausted, defeated. Her expensive wardrobe replaced by something plain, as if dressing modestly could soften the judge's view of her actions, but no amount of appearances could erase the evidence. As the proceedings began, my lawyer presented everything methodically, relentlessly. Every transfer, every fabricated story, every GPS ping showing Melissa's visits to that condo while telling me she was caring for her dying mother. Melissa sat there staring at the table, her lawyer doing his best to argue that this was all a misunderstanding between spouses, that financial disputes in marriage were common, that Melissa hadn't intended to defraud me, but the judge wasn't buying it. When we played the recorded call with her mother, the cheerful conversation proving Melissa had lied about the cancer diagnosis, the courtroom fell silent. Even Melissa's lawyer looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Then came the final blow: documentation of the condo purchase with Ryan Miller using funds directly traced back to our joint savings. The judge's expression hardened as he flipped through the files. Melissa never looked up. When it was her turn to speak, she mumbled something about feeling trapped and confused, trying to spin a narrative that she was under emotional distress, but it was too late. The mountain of evidence spoke louder than any excuse she could offer. The ruling was swift and decisive. Melissa was ordered to repay the full amount she had taken, plus legal fees and damages. The condo was seized, her accounts were garnished, and a formal note of financial misconduct was placed on her record. As for Ryan, he wasn't in the courtroom that day, but I heard through the grapevine that after losing his job, he tried to sell his share of the condo, only to find out it was no longer his to claim. Last I checked, he left town, leaving Melissa to face the consequences alone. When the gavel finally came down, signaling the end of the case, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Walking out of that courthouse, I realized something important. This wasn't just the end of a legal battle. It was the end of a chapter where I allowed blind trust to cloud my judgment. A week later, I got a letter from Melissa. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was more of a justification. She blamed stress, dissatisfaction, even me for not noticing how unhappy she was. She ended it by saying she hoped someday I could forgive her. I didn't respond. Forgiveness wasn't something she earned. And honestly, I wasn't holding on to anger anymore. I had no reason to. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding, not just financially, but emotionally. I sold the house, moved to a smaller place closer to the community center, where I'd started volunteering. The financial literacy program I launched began attracting more people than I expected. People who had their own stories of betrayal, manipulation, and financial ruin. Every time I stood in front of a group sharing what happened to me, I could see the recognition in their eyes, the fear, the regret, but also the hope. Because if I could come back from it, so could they. I never saw Melissa again after the court date. From what I heard, she struggled to find steady work with her record hanging over her. The life she tried to build on lies had crumbled beneath her feet. As for me, I didn't just recover, I grew stronger. Wiser, the experience taught me that betrayal doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. And while Melissa thought she was stealing my future, what she really did was give me a new purpose, one I never saw coming. Looking back now, I realized the worst part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing that the person I shared my life with, someone I loved and trusted, saw me not as a partner, but as a resource, a means to an end. For a long time, I blamed myself. I replayed every conversation, every moment I missed the signs. How could I have been so blind, so willing to believe every tear, every story? But here's what I've learned. Trust is essential in any relationship, but trust without awareness is dangerous. Love doesn't mean turning a blind eye. It means being honest with your partner and with yourself. I used to think protecting your finances in a marriage was a sign of distrust. Now I know it's a sign of wisdom, because real partnership isn't about blind faith. It's about transparency, respect, and accountability. Melissa took a lot from me, but she didn't take my future. I built that back on my own terms. Today, when I speak to people about financial literacy, I don't just talk about numbers or accounts. I talk about valuing yourself enough to safeguard what you've worked for, no matter how much you love someone. Because love shouldn't cost you everything. If you're in a relationship, ask the hard questions, know where your money's going, pay attention to the little things that don't add up. It's not paranoia, it's protecting the life you're building. I'm not bitter. In fact, I'm grateful. Grateful that I caught the truth before it was too late. Grateful that I had the chance to turn a betrayal into a lesson, not just for me, but for anyone willing to listen. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Trust with your heart, but protect with your mind. Because sometimes the person you think would never hurt you is the one holding the knife.